Hello and welcome to the i3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I'm Julie Graham. Thank you for joining us today in this very British weather. For our second lecture of the season, I present Rob Han, a fellow Brit with a love for the American road trip. Before moving to the States, Rob was a UK-based contributing photographer to the photo agency I used to run. Since being here, he has developed a fine art practice that has enabled him to sell his photographs both at accessible prices directly to the public, as well as in limited editions through galleries. Let's hit the road.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks to everyone for coming out. Thanks to SVA. It's a real pleasure to be able to share the work with you. Can everyone hear at the back okay? Good. So I'm going to show you lots of pictures, but before that I'm going to speak for a few minutes just to kind of background how I got to being a photographer. So how did I get started? I've got some notes here so I don't get lost. So I actually didn't even own a camera until I was 31 years old. But I was kind of artistic as a kid, and over the years, even though I wasn't taking pictures, I was developing a taste. I used to look at, I used to like looking at artwork and especially photographs. I saw lots of movies. A particular favorite that I think had a lasting impact on me was Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas. And I've gone back to it over the years, and I think that that was all part of the building blocks of my photography. I read books, things like Jack Kerouac's On the Road, William Least Heat Moon's Blue Highways, things like this. It was all building, music, lots of music, especially American music, about America, about the American road. All of this kind of thing was giving me, I think, a sort of a European's romantic idea of America. From an early age, I really loved the paintings of Edward Hopper. Kind of atmospheric, quiet, lonely, it got to me. And I can remember, as I got a bit older, looking through Richard Avedon's book In the American West that, I just thought was terrific. So all of this stuff was kind of building. In the first half of the 80s, I actually moved to America. It wasn't a deliberate move. I kind of ran out of money hitchhiking, got a job in a kitchen in Austin, Texas, and kind of stayed. So I was back and forth between New York and Austin throughout the first half of the 80s. One day in 1985, I was eating in a restaurant in New York City. I was a bike messenger at the time, and the fashion designer Willie Smith came to my table. He was kind of an up-and-coming guy at the time, and asked me to be in a fashion show, which was a big surprise to me. I did it. There were people like Iman in the show. It was, it was quite exciting. I got back on my bike and carried on delivering things. But that was the start of a modeling career. After a while, I moved to Europe. And after a brief stint in Paris, I moved to Milan. I did surprisingly well with the modeling. I never really looked like a model, but I was kind of a character, and it's what was needed at the time, and I did very well. But I thought, how long can I keep this going? It just seemed, I was already 31. And, I'd never really had a career as such. I left school at 16, worked on the family farm, worked in factories. I was a watch repairer, which I did very badly for a while. I was in the London Fire Brigade. And then when I got to America, I was working in restaurants and this type of stuff. So I never really had a career. But I was in that world, and I thought, maybe I could be a photographer. I was surrounded by photographers. So I thought, I better buy a camera. So I asked a very good friend of mine, still a good friend, what I ought to buy. And he said a Nikon FM2 would be a good start. So I did that. And initially, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. My pictures were all very blurry. And I thought, oh, maybe it's my eyes. But it turned out that I didn't understand the shutter speed had to be fast enough to freeze the image, But I got the hang of it. And so I thought, well, maybe I can be a fashion photographer. I was in that world. The girlfriend I had at the time didn't like the idea of me shooting female models. So I thought, okay, I'll do men's fashion. So I started shooting friends, other models, but I was doing it very much in a sort of a portrait style. I was shooting black and white. I was really into sort of jazz photography from the 50s and 60s. People like William Claxton, Herman Leonard, this type of thing. And then on a visit to London, I saw this huge Irving Penn retrospective that had started at MoMA in, I think, 84, and I probably saw it in 86 or 7. And it was just a fantastic show. And the portraits especially were wonderful. And I thought, well, these are like not only beautiful portraits, but he'd met all of these people. He'd photographed everyone from Louis Armstrong to Picasso. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a portrait photographer, take these good pictures and also meet all of these people. So that was my plan. After a while, I went to Paris for a year, and then with that same girlfriend, we moved to London. And all the time I was modeling, but I was taking pictures and I was building a portfolio. And then I started to show these pictures to photo editors at magazines. And the first breaks I got were in music. And the first job I got, which I'm about to show you, was a portrait of Lydia Lunch for Lime Lizard magazine. Now, Lime Lizard, it did get published, it did come out, but it was the last issue. It folded. It was just a little indie magazine, but that was my break. And Lydia was, she is this sort of tough punk poet, performer, actor, singer, writer, and she sort of gave me a pretty hard time. But I stuck with it, and and she warmed to me after a while, but that was my start. So once I did this job, I thought, well, okay, now I'm like, a professional photographer. Maybe I should take some classes. And so I kind of knew what I was doing, but I thought there must be stuff that, that I was missing. So I actually took an evening class at Central St. Martin's School in London. It's a great art school. But it really wasn't very good. The teacher, I remember one of the first things he said was, you can tell a good photographer if he's carrying a tripod. And he doesn't have a tripod, he's not serious. Okay, so his idea was to match people who were opposites. So there was a guy from Singapore who was a very accomplished commercial photographer, and I was trying to do these kind of gritty, black and white, rock and roll type pictures. And he said, well, I want you to do what he does and you to do what he does, and which I had no interest in at all. So that didn't really work out too well. However, I started getting more work, within music. And this is Chuck D and Professor Griff of Public Enemy. That was in a hotel room in London. I started working regularly for the NME, New Musical Express, and they'd give me 2 or 3 things a week. And I guess I learned quite a lot doing that. I was also doing kind of like live stuff, bands, but I was doing a lot of DJs and electronic music and things like this. This is Fatboy Slim at his club Big Beat Boutique in Brighton. So I'd be going out at night doing this kind of thing. This is Tricky, sort of in the back of a club in Bristol. This was, so I'd gone to NME, and the photo editor was like really blunt. You know, he looked through my portfolio and he was like, oh, you know, this is, I don't want to use the S word, but, you know, this is S, this is S, this is S. This is great. If you do something like this, you know, I'll be happy. And then this is S. Anyway, so he gave me a job to do. It was a band, I forget their name, and I thought I'd done okay. And when I brought the pictures in, he said, well, frankly, I'm really disappointed. And so I thought, well, that's that, I've blown that. And then the next week, he called me and he gave me 4 jobs in one day. Go up to Bristol, and there was Tricky, there was an actor called Robert Carlyle who was in Trainspotting, a couple of bands, and anyway, I was up and running. And so I'd have to shoot bands, and I actually found it quite tricky to make it interesting. But this is one I like. This is Ronnie Size Represent. And, you know, got a good reaction from those guys. Once again in Bristol, actually. This is Busta Rhymes. We'd flown to America to shoot him, and we were in Cleveland. And he was on a big tour with Puff Daddy, as he was called then, Lil' Kim, Usher. It was the Missing You tour. And so we'd flown there, and we were meant to shoot him before the show, and he said, I don't want to do it. So, well, okay, so maybe you do it after the show. Then I said, yeah, we'll do it after the show. And then after the show, he said, I don't want to do it. So we'd come all the way from England and really had to try to push it. And so we negotiated 5 minutes for the interview and a minute for the photographer. And I was like outside of, this was in an arena, and I was outside of his backstage room. So I'm like, I don't know, you know, I don't have much time here. What if he doesn't do anything? I just want to make it rock and roll, you know. And so I put on a fisheye lens. And I walked into the room, and he's just standing there like this. And as soon as I started clicking, as fast as I could, I had a motor drive, and he just started performing, and I got some fantastic shots. This is spoken word poet Akure Wall. And you might have noticed that although I said I'm shooting black and white, they've all got a kind of a tint to them. And what this is, that they're lith prints, which is a different kind of developer. It worked with certain types of paper. Paper I loved was a Japanese paper. A company called Oriental did a paper called Seagull, and it gave this beautiful coloring. And what I really liked about it, so you've got these really punchy blacks, but also very subtle tones. You know, normally if you're trying to get those tough blacks, maybe you're going to get, you know, you're going for contrast, and the light area is going to get blown out or whatever. But with lith prints, when you had it in a developer, the kind of subtle tones would come in very, very soft, and after a while it would accelerate, and the blacks would start to come in. And if you left the thing right the way, you know, if you just left it in there, everything would turn black. So you had to pull it at the right moment. So I could never get 2 prints the same, but, you know, it was something I used to do and I liked. And this is, so I was shooting music, but I started getting other kinds of jobs. And this is a notorious British gangster, Mad Frankie Fraser. And he was an enforcer for the Richardson gang in South London. And he was known as the dentist because he used to torture people by, you know, pulling their teeth out with pliers. And so he was a bit of a scary character. But I like the picture. And then I started getting shooting actors and writers and things like this. Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum plays jazz piano. And the previous day, I had shot Horace Silver, who's a jazz pianist. And I told Jeff this, and he started humming and playing. I think it's a Son of My. I'm not sure if it's Song for My Father or I think it's Song for My Father. This famous tune of his. So that was Jeff. This is Hong Kong actress Maggie Cheung. And Ewan McGregor. At a certain point, I couldn't get the Oriental Seagull paper anymore. They weren't sending it from Japan. I was hunting around looking for other things that worked. And this was, I can't remember what this was called, but it wasn't quite as good. And you've got this kind of pinkish area around here, but you know, I was doing my best with it. This is Tim Roth, another British actor at the Savoy in London. It looks kind of dingy because of the way the blacks are starting to come in there. And one thing, so all this time I was shooting with 35 millimeter, where you get 36 shots on a roll. And I would generally, the way it would work, we would get 30 minutes and, you know, with someone, and the writer would get 25 for the interview, and I'd get 5. And what I liked to do was be in the room so that I could just kind of feel them out. They could feel me. I could look and see where would be a good spot to shoot it. I always liked to use available light if I could. And then I'd just talk to them and shoot. And I knew I'd be losing a lot of shots. Now, I know with digital, you know, you can shoot a lot. But in those days, 36 seemed like quite a lot on one roll. And I'd try to shoot 2 or 3 rolls in 5 minutes. And knowing that I would lose a lot of those shots, but if I could get a few, that would be enough. And so, you know, it's a kind of a nice moment there. That's the type of thing I was looking for. This is Chloe Sevigny, and this was in a hotel lobby, just using like a table lamp as a light source. And then, so color. You know, I was usually required to shoot color. I'd shoot black, white, and color, and I could do it, but I never felt it was very special. But, you know, I started to get better with it. This is Timothy Spall. And around about this time, you know, I was shooting a lot of stuff for Sunday magazines, this sort of thing. And I got noticed by the curator, a photography curator at the National Portrait Gallery, and asked to come in with my portfolio. And this is one that they purchased. They purchased 7 for their permanent collection. And Timothy Spall was probably the nicest person I ever photographed. And he was very unusual. You know, I always like to speak with people, but I'm asking them about themselves. And he was very unusual. He was asking me about myself, and he just seemed like a really nice guy to have a beer with.
And did you?
No, not yet. This is David Byrne, and now we're kind of really getting into the color here. This was a thing where I was told I had like 2 minutes. But I actually had, I like to use available light, but I used to carry some tungsten lights with me, just in case. And this was in a club where he was rehearsing. It was really dark. But I'd actually seen In the Mood for Love, Wong Kar-wai movie that Maggie Cheung was in, the person I showed a few slides ago. And I saw this shot where the protagonist, the guy, was like leaning against a wall, smoking a cigarette or something, and it was very beautifully lit. And it was kind of unusual that the whole of the, you know, what was mostly facing the camera was in shadow, and just kind of picked out the front of his profile. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try to do that. So I had the light kind of just to the other side of me, and this this redness on his hair. You know, he's got white hair. There was just a red light in the ceiling, which was the only light in this place, and it just worked out really nicely. And then I moved to the United States and carried on shooting. This is Anthony Bourdain at his restaurant Leal on Park Avenue South. Now, along the way, I started shooting medium format. I felt, you know, I should probably be doing that, but I was a bit scared of it. You know, I hadn't been to college, and I felt there was a lot of stuff I didn't know, and I thought, oh, I don't know if I can shoot medium format, you know, like these other guys. But I bought a camera, a Mamiya 7, which I still shoot with, you know, about, I don't know, like 25 years later or something. And it was fine. It was just the same, but bigger, you know. And I don't know what I was scared of. But what it did do, it changed the way I shot as well, because you only get 10 shots on a roll. And so I wasn't quite as gung-ho. Everything kind of slowed down because I didn't want to waste things. So it developed a bit of a different style. Now, all of this time, you know, the only photography I was doing was, it was work. And I'd see a lot of photography that I admired, and it was mostly personal projects. And I thought, you know, I should try to shoot some personal stuff. But I couldn't think what to do. I was in London, and there was nothing that really inspired me. I'd look around, and then I saw, we're going to come on to the road trip pictures, but I'd seen, well, I'll tell you what, maybe I'll read the intro to the book, to Diesel Fried Chicken, and this will explain what happened. So let's, so this is my book, Diesel Fried Chicken, and I'm going to read the intro that I wrote for it. So this was, so here we go. So, one dark and rainy winter's night in 1999, I sat at home in London watching a TV show called This Is Modern Art. The presenter was driving an empty road under a clear blue sky near the high desert town of Marfa, Texas. He was talking about the artist Donald Judd. It was very beautiful, and I thought, I want to be there. In October 2001, I flew to Los Angeles and drove a rental car through the desert states of the American Southwest to Marfa and back again, following a different route. I traveled with my camera and a bag of film and took photos along the way. It was a thrilling experience. That trip and those photographs were the beginning of this body of work. When I returned home, I was pleased with the photos, and I thought I could make a book, but needed to take one more trip to complete it. Almost 17 years later, having moved to New York City in 2003, and after a great many more road trips, driving thousands of miles, this is that book. The mythology of the American road first started to take hold of my imagination in the mid-1970s through reading books, listening to records, and watching movies. Now, driving those endless roads, camera by my side, I'm still searching for that mythic country, and sometimes finding it. I'm not documenting the brutal, creeping sprawl of corporate America. I'm seeking the magic that still exists in the spaces in between. So this was my personal project, you know, something that excited me, and which I'm actually like still doing now, you know, all those years later. So I kind of had to, I was still in London when I did the first 2 trips, and then I moved to the United States. But for some reason, whatever I saw around me at home wasn't exciting me, and I just needed to go somewhere else. And so I'm going to run through the pictures in the book now, and then we're going to move on and have some other stuff. But So this is kind of a fairly good start to the book. I think it shows some things I'm interested in. You know, it's kind of surreal, and I'm often looking for things that are real but actually, you know, look surreal. I just found this beside the road in the Mojave Desert. And so you've got the road, you've got the idea of the trip, the whole thing, and the surrealness of it. This is Tonopah, Nevada. There's a speedway about 10 miles out of town. And I was kind of racing through the desert trying to get there before the sunset. And it's hard to get your head around the distances out there. And I didn't quite make it before the sunset, but I got there just as the sun had gone down, and it was kind of fortunate that the colors hitting the top of those hills were, you know, kind of reflective of the colors of the car. This sign in New Mexico, I sometimes show this to people, and people think it says God, which it doesn't, because that's it. That's the other side of the sign. I saw the G and I thought, wow, this is cool, you know, and I got it. And then I walked around the other side, and I was fortunate that the light was coming in from the side, so the exposure was more or less the same. And, you know, it makes a really nice double-page spread in the book. I've had, you know, I sell, this is one of the pictures I sell on the street. I'm going to get to that in a little while. And I've had people ask if I've got one with A in it. They're not really getting what's going on there. This is also out in the middle of Nevada, where they built a new road, and this was part of the old one. It was still being used by some farmers or whatever, but I just love that that image. This guy is in a bar in Montana. And it was the only place in this little town called Augusta where I could get a sandwich for lunch. So I stopped off. This guy was there, got talking to him, bought him a beer, asked if I could take his picture. And he was like, sure. He said, do you mind if I smoke for the picture? You're allowed to in Montana. And I was like, sure. So I did a few shots, and then afterwards he showed me a framed magazine page from the 70s on the wall of this bar, and it was him. He was on a horse. He had the hat and sheepskin coat, surrounded by cattle, and he had a cigarette, and he looked very cool, very kind of Marlboro man. And I think he was just trying to maintain his cool image by smoking. So one thing I found tricky with you know, I did shoot a few portraits for the book, and I found it a little awkward just approaching strangers. And the only times I've ever been turned down is when I've just walked up to someone and asked if I could take their picture. You know, it puts them on the spot. They can say yes or no. It's probably easier to say no. So, you know, what I would do is I'd get talking to them. I'd have my camera. I'd say, you know, I'm traveling around the country taking pictures of places and people, and they're probably thinking, oh, I wonder if maybe he'll ask me. And so it gives them a bit of time to think about it. You know, I probably come across as being fairly safe and okay, and I'd never got anyone turn me down with that approach. So, you know, if anyone finds that awkward, that's how I've done it. This is where the title of the book came from. For a long time, I had a different title in mind, which was, I don't know if anyone can see it, it says, I Dream a Highway. It's a song by Gillian Welch. It's related to my road trips, and that was going to be the title to the book. But as time went by, it just started to feel wrong. It was a little too romantic. A lot of the pictures I was taking, they had a sort of a humor in them. And I'm thinking, what can it be? And, you know, and I was just walking along Houston Street one day thinking about the pictures, and I thought, diesel fried chicken. you know, I thought that's a great title. I really love it. I'm going to do another book that we'll get onto a little later, and I haven't got a title as good as that yet, and I'm not really confident that I will. So that's in Van Horn in West Texas, and it's obviously diesel and it's fried chicken, but I like to think that, you know, there is a DFC out there. And so, again, you know, I'm often looking for humor, and I think, you know, maybe this is not a very original thing to say, but I think probably all photography, and maybe all artwork, is a kind of self-portrait. So, you know, there's stuff in your personality that's coming out. So a lot of mine, that there's, you know, kind of a solitary nature at times, can be a little melancholy maybe. But I like humor as well, and you know, trying to be funny, and so, you know, that's got a bit of everything in there, and so what more could you ask for, you know? It was in Northern California. This was outside the Lone Horse Saloon in Marfa, Texas, and those are Lone Star beer bottle caps. The blue ones are the light beer, I think. There's a couple of Topo Chicos in there as well. This was the cover of the book, which I tried a few things and eventually settled on this just for the graphic nature of it. I didn't want any words in a picture that were going to clash with the title, and you know, and it's this, again, it's this kind of mysterious thing. So the thing with my photos, they're mostly very simple, but I think there's usually another layer there where, you know, where you're thinking, what's going on here, you know, and I like that. I like there to be questions. So it's surreal. It's actually, there's a company that makes these called Ropomatic, and it's to practice rodeo on, you know, for kids. And this was kind of displaying their wares. But to me, it looked like it could be a sculpture in the Museum of Modern Art, something like that, you know. And this one is in Marfa. This is there's a trailer park there called El Cosmico, where you can stay, you know, like it's a motel. And this crochet was actually done by a woman from Brooklyn, or who lives in Brooklyn, called Magda Sayegh. So, you know, all of these pictures I'd been taking for a few years, not really sure why, except that I just loved doing it. I wasn't sure where it was going. And I'd moved to New York in the meantime, and work was kind of slowing down. So I'd been working for magazines, record companies. The record companies were struggling, not sure how to make money after the whole, you know, the internet thing. Magazines were struggling too. I was getting less work, I was getting less money, and I was getting in debt. I did actually have some limited edition prints with Brian Klemp's gallery in Chelsea, Klemp Art. And, you know, he sold a few of my prints, but it wasn't a lot, and you know, it's not easy. And I wasn't making enough to get by. So out of desperation, you know, I just didn't really know what to do. And then I saw people selling stuff in the street in New York, and I thought, well, maybe I can do that. Maybe people will buy this stuff. I went out to Prince Street. You know, I bought a table. I planned it all out. I got all the gear, and I went out there. And I went on a Friday. I wanted a kind of soft opening, and I sold 3 prints. And I thought, wow, you know, like nowadays I'd be really disappointed to sell just 3 prints, but I thought, well, people buy this stuff, you know, and that was. That's the thing I'm doing to this day. I first went out in 2010 and started selling these small They're in like 11 by 14 mats. The image is a bit smaller than that. And I sell them at when I first went out, I think I was selling them at $25. And 13 years later, they're $35. So I've been, jacking it up. And it was a thing I would never have chosen to do, and it felt like a kind of a, sort of end of the road type of thing. I've come to this, but it actually turned out to be a really good thing for me. I'd been out there for, 2 or 3 months. This woman, Christiane Sell, came by, and she had what at the time was a photo gallery that sold books called Click, C-L-I-C. And she said, I really like this stuff. We could start selling big prints. And I said, okay, that sounds great. But she was a little concerned because I'm selling them on the street for, this kind of price. And she said, well, maybe we can do different images. Now, I didn't want to do that because at this point, I kind of knew that some images were easier to sell than others. I didn't want to limit myself by giving her the stronger ones or the ones that sold more easily, let's say. And I also didn't want to stop her having the strong images because, the big prints are not easy to sell. They're gallery prices. So I said, well, I don't really want to do that. And she said, well, okay, so let's just make sure that, you don't sell anything above a certain size and I don't sell anything below a certain size. And it's worked out. It's been terrific. She's sold a lot of my work. Generally, the larger prints are sort of 50 by 60. They sell for $6,000. We've done some a bit bigger, but that's been a really good thing for me. She's expanded now. She actually owned a company called Calypso, which was women's clothing and home goods, which she sold to a company for a lot of money. But she had, what do they call it, gardening leave. She wasn't allowed to sell clothing or home goods for like 5 years, I think it was. So when that time was up, she started selling like everything. But she still sells a lot of photography. Initially, I was a little skeptical because it was a photo gallery. But actually, it's really good because people will come into the place, looking for pillows or whatever they want, and they see the artwork and they say, oh, that looks nice, and so they'll often buy the artwork. Another good thing with it that I like is if it's a traditional gallery, your work's going to be on the wall, if you're lucky, if you have a show, for like a month. And then the rest of it is often tucked away somewhere. Whereas more often than not, I've got something on the wall there that people can see and want to buy. So that's been a really good thing for me. She was also cool with me just selling on the street. So it's an unusual situation where I can sell the small ones and the big ones. A month or two later, a guy from Sweden called Christian Larsson came by, and he has a Chelsea-style gallery in Stockholm called Larsson Warner. And he bought a lot of my big prints. He gave me a solo show there. I've had 2 solo shows with him, and off of the back of those shows, I had a museum show in Sweden as well. Now, he was more skeptical about me selling on the street. And when I had the first solo show there, he kept me away from speaking to anyone. He didn't want me to spill the beans. The next time around, they've got a gallery by the seaside, kind of like their version of the Hamptons. It was much more relaxed. He let me play a soundtrack, and I could speak to people, and it was really interesting because, every week I'm on the street, speaking to people about the prints, these $35 prints, and selling them, and I was basically doing the same thing with these $6,000 prints, with people, and it was great, you know. Sorry. So you know, that worked out. So I've got the thing with Christian in Stockholm. So let's move on. Sorry about that. This woman's in Arizona. I stopped to take pictures of a junkyard, and she came out to see what I was up to, kind of angry. But I got talking and got to take a picture of her. And I guess you can, yeah, you see on her arm there are these kind of slashes, and she has a Rottweiler that, you know, a real junkyard dog that she said was just being playful. She's called Dottie, by the way. This was like on a porch in a little town in California called Keeler. And one thing, when I first got back from taking the first pictures on those first trips, the first trip or two, and I started showing pictures to people, people started mentioning photographers to me that I didn't really know about. Now, I probably was aware on some level of this type of imagery. I'd seen stuff, but I hadn't been, at that time, I'd been interested in like black and white photography, you know, looking at photographers, whatever. And this stuff, I was shooting this stuff, and people started mentioning people like Stephen Shore, William Eggleston. And since, you know, they've become favorite photographers, Richard Misrach, Joel Sternfeld, people like this, fantastic photographers. I hadn't, on a conscious level, really been aware of these guys. But then I started buying the books and looking into it and loving it. And then I kind of had this dilemma when I'd be out on a road trip and I'd see something, maybe like this, and think, oh, that looks a bit like, you know, like it could be an Eggleston or whatever. And initially, I wouldn't take the picture. I'm like, oh, well, you know, that's a bit too much like this. But then I got over that, and I thought, well, just take the picture, and you can decide afterwards, you know, if it's okay. And the thing is, I think even if we were trying to copy something, it's probably going to come out looking different, you know. And also, I've been very aware of just trying to develop a sensibility. I want the body of work to hold together as one body of work with my style, let's say. And so over time, you know, it becomes like my picture more than looking. I mean, everything's going to look like something else, I guess. But, and this was in New Mexico, in the sort of Navajo Nation, and out there, a lot of the Navajo, they'll live way off the main road, up a dirt track a few miles, and so a friend or whoever could know where to turn. They'll put up this kind of it's almost like a totem, I guess. And one thing, when I'm out there, I'm looking for something that is interesting, but I also want it to be, if I find something interesting and I can make a beautiful picture of it, that's my aim. So if it can be interesting and beautiful, then I've sort of cracked it. And it's not always possible to do, but that's what I'm looking for. This, like, you know, it's hard to believe this. Couples welcome. The screen is off there to the right-hand side, so, you know, facing away from the road. But I just love to find stuff like this. This one, again, actually in Navajo country. Sometimes when you're out west, you're going to see a series of signs, you know, maybe every half mile saying, up ahead, 4 miles, really, really good beef jerky or something like that. This was the only sign remaining. So I don't know what it's about, but I like that. You know, I love that it's, once again, there's a question. It's like, you know, what is this, you know? This one I hope this is New Mexico. I hope it's not as bad as it looks. I think it's got a kind of cinematic quality to it. I imagine this being the opening shot of a movie. some car in the distance coming up, and and the whole story starts. And one thing that until very recently, and I'll talk about this in a little while, I just haven't wanted to touch anything that I find. I might take a bit of litter out of the picture or something, but I don't want to start rearranging things. It just would kind of spoil it for me. And so, I just came across this and took a picture of it. Now this one is actually on the first roll of film on the first of these road trips that I did. I flew into LA, spent the night in a cheap motel in Joshua Tree, and then headed out on Highway 62, which is this super desolate road heading out towards Arizona. And this kind of set the scene for me for the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, I like this, But that was on that very first roll. And this was actually a little further down that same road. It's, often I'm just, a lot of the stuff I find, I'm thinking, well, how do I find this stuff, And I'd go out on a trip and I think, well, what if I don't find anything else? Maybe, what am I going to find? I can't imagine. And then I come across stuff. So this one, I went back through there about a year and a half later. And this is that same tree. Looks like someone set fire to it at some point and piled more stuff on, tires, and and it's kind of a tragic thing, but in a way, it's a kind of a beautiful picture. And I guess it could be read as what we're doing to the planet as well. It's pretty extreme. And then I went back and it was gone. So that was what did happen to it. And you can see a couple of the tires in the background and that axle. This is one of these things that, how do I come across this? So this was the median of I-80 in Utah. I was just speeding along and caught it out of the corner of my eye and, turned around, came back, and sort of got down there. I was up to my ankles in mud, crouching low to get a good angle and hoping I wouldn't fall over, but and the next day that was gone. But that's the type of thing I just can't even imagine. This is in Texas. That cross is, I don't know, like maybe 150 foot high or something, but kind of graphic. This is a place called Rhyolite in Nevada that was once the third biggest city in Nevada. That was a bank, and it was one of these kind of mining boom towns that was populated heavily for like 10 years. And it had theaters and a racetrack and train station. They had to haul water in. It's just out in the desert. And the reason normally if you go there, it's going to be blue skies all the way. But there'd been a big sandstorm that I actually got caught up in. And that was all just hanging in the air and gave it that atmospheric look. This is an artwork by someone called Lightning Macduff. And it's based on Shelley's poem, Ozymandias. And there was a plaque on, this was like a cow field, and on the barbed wire there was a little plaque claiming that Shelley's poem had been written about, the poem was actually set in Egypt. It was an Egyptian pharaoh, and it was like, look what's left of the great man, that kind of thing. And this was claiming that Shelley's poem had been written about the Texas Panhandle. This is a sun tunnel. It's in Utah, and I don't know if anyone's heard of Spiral Jetty on the Great Salt Lake. Robert Smithson did an artwork in 1970, and his wife was Nancy Holt, who was also an artist, and she did these sun tunnels. There are 4 of them placed, 2 facing this way, 2 facing that way, and I'd read a book actually called Spiral Jetta about a woman. I think she was an art student, and she had a Volkswagen Jetta, and she went out looking at land art in the West. And this was one thing she wanted to visit, and she actually gave up and couldn't find it. And I found it very difficult to find myself, but I did eventually get there, and it was, pretty cool. So this is, kind of a well-known place these days. It's actually, it really exists. It's not a real Prada store. It's an art installation by Elmgreen and Dragset, two Scandinavian artists. I first saw this in the afternoon, and I thought, wow, this is a cool thing, but the light was horrible. The light was in the wrong place, it was behind it, but I thought, the sun's probably going to rise on this. So I went on into Marfa. This is about 40 miles outside of Marfa, Texas. Got a motel and got up at like 4 a.m. It was in the summertime, and got out there, and it was just beautiful. There was actually running parallel with the road behind me, there's a rail track, and which you can see in Paris, Texas, actually. Harry Dean Stanton is walking on that rail track. But anyway, and as I was there waiting for the right moment, this big goods train came rumbling along, and the engineer saw me, and he waved, and I waved to him, and I thought, wow, he's taking that trip. It was probably going from El Paso to San Antonio, taking that trip every morning, watching the sunrise over the Chihuahuan Desert, and I thought that's a beautiful job to have, This is the Great Salt Lake, and I'd actually gone to photograph Spiral Jetty, which I did, and this was next to it, and thought, I'll take a picture of that. And initially I thought it's a bit too simple, but I grew to love it. I think it's an unusual picture. I think it's hard to judge the scale of this thing. Is it like an island, or it's probably, it might be as wide as this desk. I'm standing just in the water, at the edge of the water. And I went back there a year later, something I quite often do. I'll go back someplace and see if I get a different picture. And I could see mountains in the background, but where this morning haze had just obscured it. You might have seen, I'm often drawn to words, and sometimes I have to stop myself from photographing signs all the time. But if I find something special, this actually is a tourist attraction south of Moab, Utah, called Hole in the Rock, where a man and his wife had built a home into caves at the bottom of this rock face, and it's become a tourist attraction now. And it attracted me, but I thought, well, it's not quite interesting enough, so I cropped out rock. And I don't know if anyone's been to see the Ed Ruscha retrospective at MoMA, fantastic show. And he's someone that I've come to really appreciate, and I could almost see this being one of his paintings, It's just, and I'm kind of into a rock theme here. This is called the Giant Rock. It's in Landers, California, and they claim it to be the world's largest freestanding boulder. I think it's about 70 foot high or something. Hard to tell the scale here. This bit broke off just right around the time of the millennium, I believe. It was, kind of ominous. And still going with the rocks, this is Racetrack Playa in Death Valley. These rocks, for many, there are a bunch of these all across this playa. And for many years, people just didn't know what was going on. Lots of theories about magnetism, one thing and the other. They set up time-lapse photography And apparently what happens is sometimes it'll rain. At nighttime, the water will freeze. It's a windy spot. The next day, the sun comes out and the ice starts to drift and it drags these rocks along the bottom. And that's what's going on. It's, again, a kind of a cool, mysterious thing. Yeah, I just like this one. I think that's a faded Dairy Queen sign. Yeah. And this is Bonneville Salt Flats. It's a place where they race cars and try to break speed records. This was an event called World of Speed. And so the action's happening behind me here. And I glanced across, and this ice cream truck's just standing by itself. Looks like it's the only thing for miles around. And I thought, wow, that's a cool shot. And once again, it's this thing of what's going on here. You know, you've got questions. That's something I like. And this guy's called Zipper, and he had a hot rod that he was racing there. And one thing, you know, I was talking about portraits and how it can be tricky to photograph people. One thing I found is that at events, it's a lot easier. There are photographers walking around, people know they're taking pictures, and they seem to don't mind being part of the whole thing. And I found it a lot easier in a situation like this. There's none of sort of, oh, what do you want to take a picture of me for? You know, they kind of get it. And there's one of the hot rods that was racing, an old Ford. This is not there. This is actually a place called Soda Lake in Central California. Just like the simplicity of it. This is a place called the Salton Sea in Southern California. So to me, it looks like Neptune's throne or something. You see, it's been in the water and just sitting up there. And I went back there a year later. These are actually the same rocks. It's just shot in a slightly different direction. It's the same spot, and there was a different chair there, which is kind of very mysterious. Little romance here. This is in New Mexico. I just can't imagine going to that disco. And sticking with the romance theme, I love the way that this is Nyland in Southern California. You know, most of these pictures I'm taking, I'm not really shooting in cities, and I know that's, you know, I know a bunch of people, including some people in here tonight, who take a lot of great pictures in the city, and they walk around with a camera all the time taking pictures in the city. And it's just not my thing. I tried it. I never do anything very special. And I'm kind of an unusual photographer where most of the time I'm not taking pictures. I do it on these road trips. Everything's building up and it all comes out in a short period. And it's generally not in cities. You know, it's in small towns, it's in out of the way places, and this is one of them. But I love the way the person ran out of space. didn't plan it, yeah. And they got the U up the side. And this again, it's in Arizona. Just the colors, the graphic nature of it. This is just outside of Amarillo, Texas. And I'm like, what is this? You know? I did a little research, and there used to be a character in Amarillo called Stanley Marsh III. He wasn't the third, he was III. And he was like an eccentric oil billionaire. And he's kind of a controversial figure. I think he did a few bad things. But one thing he also did was he funded artists, and I believe he actually funded this San Francisco collective called the Ant Farm that did Cadillac Ranch, among other things. And there used to, at least, be a building in Amarillo, I think it's called the Dynamite Factory, where he would fund artists to do projects. And one thing they do are these signs. And there's a neighborhood in Amarillo, little houses, modest neighborhood, that is full of these signs. And if you want one in your front yard, you can have one. So a lot of them have words, some have pictures, and it's kind of bizarre. But that was the first one I'd ever seen. This is Montana. This is a sort of picture that, it's a beautiful, bucolic scene, but I wouldn't have taken the picture if it wasn't for the sign. And it's actually a stop meth, is the idea. The other side of the roof, it said "not even once," which is their campaign out there. Now, this is another of those signs. It's actually in the little town just outside of Amarillo called Adrian, tiny place, and it had a few of them. And this lady saw me she looked out of a window and saw me taking a picture and wondered what was going on, and I asked if she would pose for the picture. And I think actually it was Julie that pointed out what this was all about, the Who Stuffed That White Owl. I think it's a poem. I didn't know this, but there's a poem. It's a kind of a jokey poem where there's this cocky young guy in a barber shop, and there's an owl, like in the barber shop, and he starts complaining about what a poor job they've done with this stuffed owl. Who stuffed that white owl? They did such a terrible job, it doesn't even look like an owl, this, that, and the other. Then at the end of the poem, the owl moves. I thought that you'd pointed that out. Okay. Maybe I dreamt it, I don't know. This was in Washington State. It was a little tiny town called Inchellium, maybe 10 houses. Most of them had something outside, so flamingos or windmills or something like that, but this was the best one. Another portrait, lady in Helena, Arkansas. Sort of on the other side, it's on the Mississippi, on the Arkansas side. That was in Idaho. It's soda pop. And carrying on with the theme, this one, actually this one is, this is probably the first picture where there was this car with a rusted surface and the bottle was on the ground. And I actually placed it on the hood because I thought it would make a nicer picture. So I broke my rule there with that one. This is New Orleans. It's about 2 years after Katrina. This is a high school in the lower 9th Ward. I was in there, it's pitch black, and I opened the door. I got through a hole in the wall, and I opened the door, and that's what the light is on here. It's an old guy beside the road in Alabama. I stopped to photograph this little cornfield. He came out to see what I was doing. He gave me a couple of ears of corn. Yeah. This is a plant that you'll find all over the South called kudzu. And kudzu grows incredibly fast in the summertime, up to a foot a day. That's what's going on here. That's just about to go under. I went down there, I did a whole series of pictures of kudzu. I did a little series on six-man football in West Texas. There are schools out there where, in this particular league, there have to be no more than 50 kids in a school, in a high school, boys and girls. And this is a place called Balmorhea. There was one school in Marathon, Texas, that only had 6 kids, including a girl, and the school pulled them out of the league, though, because 3 of the boys got caught stealing a car in Alpine, Texas. But that was a very cool little series, you know, these little towns out in West Texas. And this kid, the same place, he had hurt his arm doing rodeo, and so had to sit out practice. But that's part of the same series. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. I know that, you know, modern cars are very comfortable and technically superior, but as far as design goes, you know, I just love these old cars, and they seem to, for the most part, I think there's a lack of imagination now with modern car design. This is Green River, Wyoming, just a very graphic picture. I'm not really watching the time here. Okay. This is, what is the time? It's... Oh, I gotta hurry up, right. Okay, sorry, talking too much. So I'll just hurry on through these. Oklahoma. This one was interesting. You know, I shoot on film, and it was the darkest sky I'd ever seen in the daytime. A storm had just passed through, but it wasn't as dark as this. On the contact sheet, it was, and I tried playing around with it to get it a bit lighter, and then I just left it. I'm not sure why that happened, but it's kind of very dramatic. I was concerned that I was going to go too fast and not talk long enough. Sorry. Just quickly, this one is in New Mexico, and I wonder what this was. It turns out it was a ranch. The people that own the ranch are called McDonald, and they had acquired this sign. It's in Wyoming. It's the kind of final picture in the book. I don't really know what's going on, but I did realize, maybe a year ago, that on the first trip, I went in October 2001, and it was not long after 9/11, and there were a lot of flags around, and I think that's why that flag is on there. So then, you know, I want to do another book. I've got lots of images. I might add a few more. I'm hoping to do it next year. I'm just going to show you a few of the newer pictures. I'm just going to race through them for the next book. And once again, you know, just looking for surreal things. I started shooting at nighttime, something I'd never done. For me, it's a lot of guesswork. But I'm getting some nice results. And this is one thing, you know, I'm shooting film, and with my naked eye, I never saw this green. I could see the red, but the film has picked that up. It's the same place, like about a year later. That was an artwork in Palm Springs by a Native American called Nicholas Galanin. So I'm just looking out for stuff like this the whole time. You know? Mostly about the color. Now, I want you to just remember this one for a minute. I'm going to refer to it in a moment. Something political there. So those are, some of the images from the next book. And then I just started experimenting with something and I don't know how this is going to go, if it's going to work or where I'm going with it, but I've started last spring just placing some things within a landscape. And this one, I just bought some red plexiglass at the Home Depot and stuck it in the ground out in the desert. And after I took this picture, I was driving back we have a home in Joshua Tree now, where we go in the winter. I was driving back and I saw that red door just sticking in the ground. It's like really bizarre. That's at White Sands, New Mexico. And then I bought some fabric. I placed in some rocks. And that's that. And I'm sorry I wasn't watching the time.
Hello,
Hi.
Thank you so much. This is very inspiring. I have a question. So, when you were talking, the photograph of the car that you placed, and then you broke your own rule, right? Putting the glass.
Yeah.
I see that you're doing this in your new body of work.
Yeah, I've started doing it. I've got some ideas to do other things with it, and I enjoy taking the pictures. I think they look good. I'm not quite sure. I basically live by selling my prints. That's my income. Whether I can sell this stuff, I don't know. But we'll see. But I enjoy doing it. I like how they look. I'm going to keep doing it. Got some other ideas. So I'm just feeling my way with this. I'm still going to be doing the road trips and looking for other things, but it's something I'm introducing. The thing with the bottle, that was just, I don't know, I just thought I'd try doing that. But this other thing is much more of a planned idea to create a body of work. And I might try to fit it in with the other stuff. I'm not sure how it's going to work yet, but,
No,
yeah.
I love it. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. I approve.
Good.
Great.
One approval. Any other questions? Yes.
Oh, we've got someone down here.
Miss Stella.
Stella.
So I don't need this. So have you considered leaving these pieces that you put in the landscape as opposed to taking them with you?
No. Well, first
Okay.
of all, I want to place it somewhere else.
Okay. Okay.
But also, no, I don't want to be, that's kind of like littering, I think.
No, I see it more as you're creating art and you're leaving it around.
I guess so. I guess I'm an installation artist now, right? Yeah. I don't know. I hadn't considered
Because
that.
somebody else would come across it and wonder
Yeah.
what it was about.
Yeah.
So
I
it
don't know. I'd have to
creates-
think about that.
Okay.
It feels a bit like I shouldn't be doing it. I don't know. I'll take, yeah,
Okay.
that's an idea. Thanks.
Yes.
Hey, Raul.
Hey Rob, thanks so much for the show. Are there places that you haven't been?
Oh yeah, there are. I've mostly, you can see it's mostly out west. I've done some trips in the south. I've shot some stuff up in Maine, but I kind of, I'm drawn to these open spaces. I'm not sure. I think partly, coming from Europe, which is green and crowded, and there's a great attraction, I think, for Europeans, especially in those open desert landscapes. There's something great about it, and exciting, and it seems to work best for me. I'm looking. I think even when I used to do portraits, I didn't want them to be too busy, and I wanted there to be some space around it. So I'm always looking for space, which is probably why I'm not shooting in New York. Because everything,
Not much room.
the pictures are filled up with stuff, and that's not really my thing. So, but I was thinking about maybe going up into Canada, kind of the empty part in the West.
Have you done Montana already?
Yeah.
You have, yeah.
I mean, I'll go back. But I did think about Mexico, but I just don't know if it's a good idea driving around. And I'd be in the kind of the northern states and the desert, and you know, maybe not a great idea.
Yeah, wrong kind of coyotes out there.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Sure.
Yes.
Hey, Baron.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Good.
I was looking at one of those images, the one of that tire with all the mud on it and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know you're a very calm person, but I'm wondering when you feel like you really found an image that really, like, I mean, do you jump out of the car and start running over there? Or
Oh,
you're like calm?
Yeah. Well, actually, quite often I'll drive past something, and I think, is that interesting? And sometimes I'll go like a mile thinking about it. And then I'll be like, yeah, I'd better go back, take a look. And I'll go back and I'll look through the camera. And because I've only got 10 shots on a roll with this camera, quite often I won't even take the picture. I mean, like, is this really interesting? If I find something that is, you know, that does give me a buzz, I can feel it, you know, and I'll even say to myself, yeah, you know, it's like there is I kind of recognize that looking through the camera at it, you know, and usually I'm right. I mean, not always. Sometimes I think I've got something great and it turns out, yeah, it's not really. And then sometimes the other way where I'll take a picture of this and then it grows and it's better. But yeah, it is exciting to come across something. And on the other hand, sometimes I will drive all day long and I'm not seeing anything. And I've got, on these trips, I have to remind myself that I'm having fun, you know, it's because what's happened over time, like the first trip especially, everything was new, everything was great, you know, it was all exciting. Over time, it's become, there's a pressure for me to get good stuff, as good as I've got before, hopefully better. And I feel a pressure, and especially if I go 2 or 3 days where I don't feel I've got much, it starts to bug me. But sometimes if I'll start the day and I've got like a couple of good shots, I'm like, yeah, this is great, you know. So yeah, there is that whole thing, yeah.
Any last question? Yeah, I'm going to head to the back.
Hi. So I really like that you said that like the pictures that it shows your personality and like your style and stuff like that. Between all the works that you showed us, is there any piece that it shows your personality the most? And is there any locations that you missed that you didn't photograph, but like now you think about it now, like it's like I should have took that picture because it was very me?
I think it's more the entire body of work reflects, you know, my personality. I think the first trips I was taking, I'd been in a long-term relationship that, you know, had kind of had ended, and I was feeling quite melancholy. And the early stuff, a lot of the pictures, they were kind of showing that. As time went by, you know, things looked up and I got in a new relationship. I was happier, and the pictures showed that as well, you know. As far as pictures, there's a kind of an interesting story. So the camera I use is a rangefinder, which means you're not actually looking through the lens. You're looking through the little bit of glass above the lens. And I was out in, I think I was in Nevada, or I was in Oregon, and I came across this, there'd been a big storm, the skies were dramatic, there was an Airstream trailer in amongst the sagebrush, and it just looked fantastic, you know. And I got there, I took this picture, I was excited, you know, that's what you were talking about, Baron. Thought, wow, that's a good one, you know. And then I'm driving away, and I've gone about 150 miles, and my camera's on the seat beside me, and I glanced down, and I saw that the lens cap was on. And so you know, I hadn't taken the picture. The cap was on it. I hadn't been able to see because I wasn't looking through the lens. And, you know, and this picture gets better and better in my mind. And it was just, so what I do after that, I never leave the lens cap on. I have one of these things that stops the sun coming in and that protects the lens. And so, you know, that was one that I missed, you know. I think there was someone in the middle who had a question. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for sharing with us. You said you go back to places often.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how time passes on these places and how does that affects like your perception and your work.
Yeah, so I do that quite often, and sometimes I'll find that there's a couple of things going on. Sometimes it's changed in an interesting way, and it can be a better or as good picture as before. Other times maybe it just looks worse and it's not as good, or the conditions aren't right. But something else that has happened, like that picture which is on the cover of the book of that cow, I'd photographed that before. And when I went there before, I photographed it kind of more within a landscape. I thought it was an interesting thing, but I hadn't really the picture wasn't that strong. And I went back through there and I thought, you know, if I just get in tighter, have it isolated against that blue sky, this looks stronger. And so sometimes I'll see it in another way, and sometimes I've done an entire trip once where I just wasn't really feeling it, and I didn't get that many good pictures. And I actually went back a few weeks later and took a shorter trip when I was feeling better and got good stuff. So sometimes it's me, where I'm just not seeing things in such a good way, and sometimes that thing has changed and is like, wow, that's interesting. You know, a bit like with that tree, how that had changed so much and, you know, made it more interesting. Thank you. Sure.
I do just want to end, if Rob, you could just tell us when and where we can find you. Can we still find you on Prince Street in the fall?
Yeah. So I'm generally out there, depending on the weather, Friday through Sunday on Prince Street between Green and Wooster. I've got a table. I have a whole bunch of affordable prints. I sell those on my website as well, and then the you know, the bigger limited editions, I sell them through Click here in the city. And I'll be out there on the street until probably Christmas. I mentioned that we have a house now in Joshua Tree, and I'll be out there for like 4 months and then back again in New York. Thank you.